My daughter nearly drowned today, the CEO said, raising a glass at the gala. And one man saved her life, Officer Daniels. Elijah stood in the shadows, soaking wet, invisible. 24 hours later, the truth exploded across the internet. The marble floors of Blackwell Corporation's lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Elijah Thompson methodically mopped the entrance. At 62, his movements were precise and meditative, each stroke of the mop a testament to decades of quiet dignity. His uniform was pristine, his demeanor calm, and his presence, to most who passed through these halls, utterly invisible. "Morning, Elijah," called Maria Gonzalez from behind the mahogany reception desk. "How's your grandson's baseball season going?" Elijah's weathered face broke into a gentle smile. "Making the All-Star team. Says he wants to be like his grandpa when he grows up." "A hero, you mean?" If you love stories where the quiet one turns out to be the real hero, go ahead and like this video. It tells us to make more like it. "Just someone who shows up when it matters," Elijah replied with a soft chuckle, wringing out his mop with practiced efficiency. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and John Carter strode out like a man who owned the world, which, in many ways, he did. His $1,000 suit was immaculate, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no. "I don't care about the optics, Davidson," John Carter barked into his phone, walking directly through Elijah's freshly mopped floor without so much as a glance. "Numbers don't lie. Cut the dead weight." Behind him bounced 8-year-old Ava Carter, her school backpack swinging as she tried to keep up with her father's long strides. Unlike her father, she saw everything, especially the quiet man, with the kind eyes who always had time for her. "Hi, Mr. Elijah," she called out, waving enthusiastically. "Hey there, sunshine," Elijah replied warmly, pausing in his work. "How was school?" "We learned about heroes in history class. Did you know some heroes were invisible?" The innocent word struck Elijah like a gentle blow. He studied the bright-eyed child, seeing something in her that her father seemed to miss entirely. "Sometimes the best ones are, sweetheart." As John Carter disappeared into the elevator without looking back, James Davidson, a white executive in his 40s, approached a younger staffer near the reception desk. His voice was low, but not low enough. "Be nice to the janitor," Davidson murmured, glancing toward Elijah. "These people get offended easily these days." Maria's jaw tightened as she caught the comment. Elijah pretended not to hear, but his grip on the mop handle tightened slightly. After 23 years at Blackwell Corporation, he had heard variations of that sentiment more times than he cared to count. Later that afternoon, the back garden of Blackwell Corporation buzzed with preparation for the evening's gala. White linens draped elegant tables, while string lights were woven through the trees. The centerpiece of the garden was an ornate koi pond, its crystal-clear water home to dozens of colorful fish that swam lazily in the afternoon sun. Elijah swept the patio stones near the pond, his movements steady and purposeful. He had learned long ago that consistency was its own form of invisibility. As long as he stayed in motion, stayed quiet, stayed in his designated spaces, he could observe everything while being noticed by no one. Ava sat on a nearby bench with her nanny, a harried-looking woman in her 40s, who seemed more interested in her phone conversation than the child in her care. "I told you, I can't deal with this right now," the nanny said sharply into her phone. "She's at work with me." Bored and ignored, Ava wandered toward the pond. The afternoon light made the water shimmer like liquid diamonds, and the fish seemed to dance just for her. She knelt at the stone edge, reaching toward the water with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Careful there, Miss Ava," Elijah said gently, not wanting to startle her. That water's deeper than it looks." "The fish are so pretty," Ava exclaimed, her face lighting up. "Do you think they're happy?" "I think they're grateful someone's watching out for them," Elijah replied, his eyes crinkling with warmth. Ava laughed and skipped back to her nanny, who was now pacing frantically while shouting into her phone. Elijah glanced up at the security cameras positioned throughout the garden, their red lights blinking steadily like electronic sentinels. He had always been aware of them, but today, for some reason, they seemed more significant. 3 floors above, John Carter reviewed gala preparations with his assistant, Jennifer. His corner office overlooked the garden, but his attention was focused on spreadsheets and profit margins. "The mayor will be here, 3 board members, and the Patterson family. They're considering a major investment," Jennifer reported efficiently. "Good. Make sure nothing goes wrong tonight. Our reputation depends on it." "And Ava?" "She'll be with the nanny until 7, then home. I don't need distractions." If John Carter had looked out his window at that moment, he would have seen his daughter drifting back toward the pond as the nanny's phone argument intensified. But John Carter was a man who believed that paying attention to details was what assistants were for. "You can't just change your mind now," the nanny shouted into her phone, gesturing wildly. "I've been planning this for months." Her voice carried across the garden, causing several caterers to look up from their preparations. But she was oblivious to everything except her personal crisis, including the 8-year-old girl who was once again approaching the water's edge. Ava was drawn to a particularly large koi fish, its orange and gold scales catching the late afternoon sunlight. She leaned over the pond's edge, stretching her small hand toward the beautiful creature. "Here, fishy, fishy," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. The stone edge was wet from the automatic sprinkler system that kept the garden lush and green. As Ava leaned farther, her foot slipped. Splash! Elijah dropped his broom and ran toward the pond, his heart hammering in his chest. The water was 4 feet deep, too deep for a child to stand. He could see Ava's small form sinking beneath the surface, her school clothes billowing around her like flower petals. Without a moment's hesitation, Elijah dove into the pond fully clothed. The water was shockingly cold, but he pushed through it, his hands searching frantically until they found Ava's limp body. He pulled her to the surface and lifted her onto the stone edge, water streaming from her unconscious form. She wasn't breathing. "Come on, baby. Come on," Elijah whispered, his voice steady despite the terror gripping his heart. He positioned his hands on her small chest and began CPR, the training he had received decades ago during his brief stint as a volunteer firefighter, coming back to him as if it were yesterday. The nanny finally looked up from her phone, her face going white with horror. "Oh my God, Ava!" "Call 911. Now," Elijah ordered, his voice calm and authoritative as he continued chest compressions and rescue breathing. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds, Ava remained motionless. Then suddenly, she coughed violently, water spilling from her mouth as her body convulsed. The sound of her crying was the most beautiful music Elijah had ever heard. "That's it, sweetheart. You're okay. You're okay," he soothed, gathering her into his arms as she sobbed against his soaking wet shirt. Officer Daniels, the building security guard, finally arrived, jogging across the garden with his hand on his radio. He was a decent man, but not particularly quick on his feet or sharp in a crisis. "What happened here?" Daniels asked, breathing heavily from his brief run. "She fell in," the nanny wailed, her phone forgotten for the first time all day. "She almost drowned." Elijah looked up from where he knelt beside Ava, his clothes dripping, his dignity intact. "She's fine now, just scared." Jennifer appeared with two other executives, their faces masks of professional concern mixed with panic about potential liability issues. "Officer, what's the situation?" Jennifer asked, directing her question to Daniels rather than the man who had actually performed the rescue. Daniels stepped forward, unconsciously assuming the role of authority that his uniform seemed to grant him. "Just a minor incident. Everything's under control." "You can go get cleaned up," Jennifer said to Elijah, her tone dismissive. "We'll handle this." "Yes, ma'am," Elijah replied quietly, standing and walking away without protest. Water still dripped from his uniform, leaving a trail across the stone patio. Near the garden entrance, Maria Gonzalez stood with her phone in her hand. As the receptionist, she had come to check on the commotion, but what she had witnessed made her stomach turn with familiar anger. She had seen everything: the rescue, the credit being subtly transferred, the quiet hero being dismissed. More importantly, she had recorded it all. And if you were holding your breath like we were, don't forget to share this with someone who needs to see what happened next. Because what happened next would shake the entire company. That evening, the Blackwell Corporation Gala was in full swing. 200 guests mingled under twinkling lights, crystal glasses clinked with champagne, and the soft murmur of wealth and influence filled the garden air. John Carter stood at the podium, confident and polished, every inch the successful executive. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd, "tonight we celebrate not just our company's success, but the values that make us strong." At the very back of the gathering, almost hidden among the waitstaff, Elijah Thompson stood in a fresh uniform. He had returned to work, because that was what he did. He showed up, he did his job, he asked for nothing in return. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, he was no longer invisible to everyone. "Earlier today," John Carter continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "my daughter had a frightening accident here in our garden pond." The crowd grew quiet, leaning forward with the morbid curiosity that accompanies any brush with tragedy. "And thanks to the quick action of our very own Officer Daniels, my little girl is alive tonight." John Carter gestured toward Daniels, who waved awkwardly from somewhere in the middle of the crowd. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic, the sound of relief and gratitude washing over the gathering. But Elijah noticed something else. A few guests were looking at their phones, their expressions changing from polite attention to confusion, then to something that looked like anger. Patterson, a board member in his 60s, leaned over to whisper to another guest, "I'm glad he didn't mention the janitor. Optics, you know." But by then, it was too late for optics. Maria had uploaded the video to TikTok with a simple caption, "They gave credit to the wrong man. Here's the real hero." The footage was clear and damning. Elijah diving into the pond, pulling Ava out, performing CPR with steady hands and a calm demeanor, while Officer Daniels only arrived after the crisis had passed. Within hours, the video had gone viral. By morning, it had been viewed 5 million times. The comments poured in like a digital avalanche. Of course they gave the credit to the guy in uniform, not the black man who actually saved the kid. He risked his life and didn't even get a mention. That's America for you. This man is a hero. Where's his recognition? The audacity of that CEO is breathtaking. Find this man. He deserves better. Local news stations began calling. National outlets picked up the story. The hashtag # Elijah Thompson began trending. The phone in Blackwell Corporation's public relations department rang constantly. When Jennifer burst into John Carter's office the next morning, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Sir, we have a problem. A big one." She showed him the video on her tablet. John Carter's face went from confusion to understanding to absolute terror in the span of 30 seconds. "How many views?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. 7 million and climbing. CNN wants a statement. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. There are protesters outside. Through his office window, John Carter could see the crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk. Signs read, "Justice for Elijah," and "Heroes come in all colors." The local news trucks were setting up, their satellite dishes pointing toward the sky like electronic flowers seeking the sun. "Get our PR team, now," John Carter said. But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late for damage control. The emergency board meeting was brutal. Chairman Walsh's voice was cold. "John Carter, this is a disaster. Our company looks like it's run by racists." "It was an honest mistake." "A mistake?" Patricia Chen snapped. "You gave credit to the wrong man, while the real hero stood in silence." "The optics are terrible," someone added. "Stock's already down." Walsh leaned in. "Fix this in 24 hours, or we vote you out." Outside the building, the crowd had grown larger. Reporters thrust microphones at employees, asking for comments about the viral video and the ignored hero. The story had taken on a life of its own, becoming a symbol of something much larger than one man's rescue of one child. When Elijah arrived for work the next morning, he found the building in chaos. Employees whispered and pointed, but this time, the attention felt different. People approached him directly, their faces filled with genuine admiration and anger on his behalf. "Mr. Thompson, you're a hero," said a young accountant. "I can't believe they didn't recognize you." "That video is everywhere," added a secretary. "You saved that little girl's life." Elijah accepted their praise with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout the crisis. "I just did what anyone would do," he said simply. But Maria knew better. She had worked with Elijah for 5 years, and she understood that his actions were not what anyone would do. They were what Elijah Thompson would do, a man who had spent his life being overlooked, but who had never stopped caring, never stopped being ready to act when it mattered. "Elijah," she said, approaching him with excitement in her eyes. "You're famous. 3 news stations want to interview you. The mayor's office called. There's a GoFundMe that's raised over $200,000. "I don't need to be famous, Maria," Elijah replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "I just need to do my job." "But this is bigger than your job now. You can make a difference." That afternoon, a hastily organized press conference was set up in the back garden where everything had begun. John Carter stood at the podium, looking smaller somehow, his usual confidence replaced by the hunched posture of a man who knew he was in trouble. Cameras flashed as he approached the microphone, his hands visibly shaking. "I want to publicly apologize for a grave error in judgment," he began, his voice catching slightly. 2 days ago, my daughter Ava was saved from drowning by Elijah Thompson, a valued member of our maintenance staff. The crowd of reporters and onlookers murmured, some nodding with satisfaction that the truth was finally being acknowledged. In my gratitude and confusion, I mistakenly credited our security officer. This was wrong, and I take full responsibility. He paused, looking directly at Elijah, who stood quietly to the side, his expression unreadable. "Effective immediately, I'm promoting Elijah Thompson to Director of Safety and Emergency Response Training, with a salary increase of 300%. The crowd erupted in applause, cameras clicking frantically as they captured what should have been a moment of triumph and redemption. Everyone expected Elijah to step forward with gratitude, to accept the promotion that would change his life, to play his part in John Carter's carefully orchestrated rehabilitation. Instead, Elijah walked to the microphone with the same measured pace he had used for 23 years of cleaning these same floors. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the garden, "but I respectfully decline." The silence that followed was deafening. John Carter's face went white. The reporters leaned forward, sensing that the story was about to become something much bigger than they had anticipated. "I didn't save your daughter to get promoted," Elijah continued, his voice steady and clear. "I did it because it was right, but this situation has shown me something important." He turned to face the cameras directly, no longer the invisible man in the background. "I've been invisible for too long. Not just me, but people like me. People who work hard, who care, who act when it matters. We don't need stages or titles. We need platforms. Turns out, these people know exactly how to lead when it matters." A smile spread across his face, and for the first time in days, it was genuine. 3 investors saw that video and reached out. "I'm launching a training institute for emergency responders in underserved neighborhoods. I finally have a platform to teach others how to act when it counts." The crowd erupted in applause, genuine this time, not the polite corporate clapping of moments before. In a world that often overlooks quiet heroes, sometimes it takes a viral video to reveal what the heart already knows. That courage comes in all colors, and heroism doesn't need applause to be real. It just needs